My first thought when this came up was if you rewind back to like 2015 or 2016, quite notoriously, a lot of Chinese exchanges were zero fee all the time. And so the idea that this would be wash trading is like completely obvious to anybody who's been at this for a while. As soon as you lower fees to zero, you get immense wash trading. And that's kind of inevitable. And so it's just interesting. I don't know if I have any thought beyond that, but like this was widespread going back to like 2015 and 2016, and it took years for anything to happen about it. So it's mostly just entertaining for me to see.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. You know, I'm just sort of, you know, this was tied to their 5th anniversary, and that's kind of like important to remember. This is the world's largest crypto exchange. It's only 5 years old. You know, it's like barely crawling out of the toddler phase. And, you know, they do this thing and, you know, it's part of maybe a price war, but have they really thought through like how people would react? And suddenly we could see this flurry. And then, you know, here's the CEO tweeting, kind of trying to clean up the mess a little bit after they just introduced this thing. You know, I just thought it's kind of funny to watch. But yeah, I mean, from a market's perspective, it's like, David, you know, this like so much, even like all the Bitcoin ETF debate comes down to whether we can trust these markets. And if all of a sudden, you know, people are talking about wash trading again, you know, that could be kind of a setback for some of that narrative.
Right. Mm. Yeah, I love the shirt, by the way, Brad. Let's just zoom out now and leave the funny side away. More specific and technical analysis. What are the most important headlines or top takeaways of the week for you, Brad?
Well, you know, I mean, obviously the economic story continues front and center for Bitcoin. It continues to be pretty correlated with, you know, traditional assets in terms of stocks. There was some talk a couple of weeks ago about the decoupling, and, you know, Barry Silbert of DCG, you know, tweeted about how that would be glorious, but, you know, it not only has not been glorious, but it hasn't really happened either. You know, it's still stocks. Bitcoin's still very much trading in line with stocks, and so that just means people are just wondering what the economy is doing, and really the only reason that matters is because people just jump to looking at the 800-pound gorilla, which is the Federal Reserve. And so, I mean, ironically, in this topsy-turvy world of markets, you know, the worse things get in the economy, the more markets will go up because people will just think that the Fed's going to go soft. So anyway, but right now, you know, we had this jobs report this morning, and people are looking at that.
Yeah.
Right.
My observation. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, David, for you. Go ahead. Shoot.
Yeah. So my observation for the week is much more kind of astrological and mystical, which is we saw this, like you mentioned, you know, we had Bitcoin down to 19K, and then we saw this bounce, and like there is no telling what happens from here. This could be a dead cat bounce in a bull trap, and we could go back down to 15 or whatever. But for right now, what it looks like is happening is that by whatever weird set of coincidences, we are repeating a historical pattern where Bitcoin bounces off, give or take, previous all-time highs. So the all-time high in 2017 was just short of 20K, and so now we went a little bit below 20K and we're coming back up. And that has happened every single Bitcoin cycle at this point. And again, it might or might not hold right now, but it is weird. It's so weird that it starts getting you thinking about, because there's no reason this should happen, but it starts you thinking conspiratorially again about, you know, is this a clean market? We think so, but things like this happen that should not happen. And you start wondering if there's a man behind the curtain. So that's quite interesting to me.
Well, you know, people have really torn up Plan B and the stock to flow model, which is the idea that, you know, Bitcoin's price is a function of the every 4 years halvings. And, you know, that was supposedly going to take us to $100,000 Bitcoin. That hasn't happened. On the other hand, to what you're saying, David, we are seeing these patterns, you know, where we have a bear market every 4 years, and that's coming right on time.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. And the funny thing is, David started talking about astrology, and then the cat behind him just walked by. I'm thinking Matrix suddenly, and then you guys are talking about all of this.
No, I just have a very annoying cat.
No, that was I saw the tail, nothing more. So I don't know what was going on. But you touched upon this, Brad, and I really wanted to check with you. I remember talking to you about this yesterday also. To what's been called the bearish crossover, Omkar, our colleague, wrote about this. It's got everyone excited, thinking that the worst may be over soon and Bitcoin's bottomed in this bearish season, or will around July 15th. We touched upon this. And, even in our show yesterday, Brad, can you tell us what's going on with that? Just break it down for those who are not familiar. And does the math check out?
Well, I mean, in general, there's all of these different technical indicators that people look at, and there's all ways you can cut these charts. And so on this particular one, people are looking at the 3-day chart. So the 3 days and then periods going back, whatever, and then looking at the 200 period of those 3-day periods. And basically, there's also the 100 period moving average. And so basically you have the 100 moving period moving average moving under the 200 moving average period moving average. And that theoretically just is a sign of just what a bear market we're in. But in past cycles, that actually has signaled a bottom. It did so in 2018, and I was reading Omkar's story this morning. I think it also did that in 2015, and so that's something that people are focusing on. Again, who knows? But that has been a reliable signal in the past. So
Right.
Who knows? Maybe it works again.
Well, thanks, Brad. David, this is what I've been waiting for, this moment, because you published a striking op-ed. Brad talked about it. I read it well before, it's been updated, I believe, with the headline changing to Bitcoin mediumalist or something like that.
We have a couple of headlines floating around.
Yeah. But I want you to just break it down, because it's slightly, idealistic in nature. It's a seething criticism of Bitcoin maximalism, but take an opportunity out here. Just explain what the hell made Nick Carter start trending and why you kind of agree with him. Just break it down. What's this article about?
Sure. Well, I want to start from a weird place and sort of peel back, speaking of curtains, peel back the curtain a little bit on my own perspective, which is, over the last couple of years, I have really, in the back of my mind, had to kind of keep, to a degree, concealed the fact that I am myself, in some ways, a Bitcoin maximalist, right? And when you've been in this industry long enough, you certainly get used to those ideas and see their appeal once you see how much, frankly, just fraud and deception and bad ideas are out there in other blockchains. And also, once you really understand the nature of Bitcoin, I mean, maximalism of some sort is kind of the conclusion that you inevitably come to. That being said, what I think Nick really ran into, and what my essay was mostly about, is the culture of maximalism and what maximalism really means. And I think that both Nick and I, and people, I mentioned in the piece, and Nick has pointed out, people like Eric Wall, people like Udi Wertheimer, very pro Bitcoin, or at least, fascinated by Bitcoin and believers in its fundamental dynamics. But all of us have been pushed away from that perspective as it gets expressed in places like Twitter, where essentially you just have troll armies of people who don't really have much to add to the discussion except to yell at you if you happen to have a divergent opinion, or say that something else other than Bitcoin looks even vaguely interesting. They'll come after you, and that's really basically what Nick had to say, and what Nick ran into. His fund, Castle Island Ventures, put some money into something called Dynamic, which is a wallet-based platform for identity verification. And there are sort of two aspects to that. One is that it's multi-chain. One that I did not really cover in the piece is that it does integrate Chainalysis, and so there have been some concerns about the identity verification and other aspects of that, which do get into complicated territory. But the general gist of the backlash has really been focused on just the idea that he's investing in anything that's not Bitcoin exclusive at all, because people thought he was a hardcore maximalist. and that has become kind of a dialogue about his apostasy, his heresy against this thing that has come to take on some elements of a religion.
No, now that's fascinating. For those of you who haven't read it, please go ahead and read that. Brad, do you have a take on that article?
I mean, just to say that I basically agreed 100% with David's, I mean, I agree with David. Bitcoin is one of the most fascinating inventions of our time. I mean, it in just whatever, 11 years, 12 years, 13 years. How old is Bitcoin now? 2009 to 20, 13 years. Bitcoin is 13 years old, and it's already earned like this huge chapter, if not like a section in the history of, monetary and financial industry. It's certainly the most interesting thing going on in finance. It just spawned this whole movement. And yet you're right. Like it seems a little, to not just be enough open-minded to believe that other humans can also be capable of producing like interesting inventions. Seems, I don't know, it seems like a bad bet. But anyway, I don't know, that'd be my take.